I fell in love with a man who wore the collar of God, but his hands trembled when he touched me. He whispered prayers as if I were a sin, not a soul. Now at 75, I'm finally telling everything. If you want to know how a priest and a woman found forbidden love, subscribe now. Leave a comment where you're watching from, and trust me, you won't be able to look away. When I first saw him, I didn't see a priest. I saw a man, tall, quiet, with eyes that carried storms inside them. He stood behind the altar like he belonged to another world. And maybe he did. But somehow he ended up in mine. Back then, I was just a young woman searching for something real. Faith, purpose, maybe even love. What I didn't expect was to find it in someone I wasn't allowed to have. He never said much, but when he looked at me, it felt like he saw every part of me, the good, the broken, the hidden, and still he came closer. But every touch came with guilt, every kiss a prayer. Every time we met, he'd whisper words meant for God, as if I were a sin he couldn't resist. That's what hurt the most. He loved me, yes, but he feared me more. Now, over 50 years later, I'm ready to tell our story, not to justify what we did, not to blame anyone, but to finally say the truth out loud, because some stories don't end with forgiveness, they begin with it. So if you're ready, let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Margaret, Maggie, to those who knew me back then. I was born in a small town in Pennsylvania, where everyone went to church on Sundays and no one locked their doors at night. My father worked at the mill until his lungs gave out, and my mother, she never stopped praying for him after he was gone. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't looking for scandal. I was just lonely. Faith was important to me. It grounded me when everything else felt uncertain. That's why I spent so much time at St. Bridget's, not just for Mass, but for the silence, the peace, the sense that someone, something was listening. I helped with the altar flowers, folded bulletins, sometimes even read during service. It made me feel useful. It made me feel seen. But nothing prepared me for the way I felt the first time I really talked to him. Father Thomas. His voice was calm, but there was something behind it, something searching. I remember how he listened, not like a priest hearing a confession, but like a man trying to understand another soul, and maybe trying to understand himself. We weren't supposed to get close. I knew that. He knew that. But somehow we did. Not right away. Not all at once. But slowly, quietly, like two people walking toward something they both feared and wanted. It started with a moment. One I didn't realize was the beginning, until much later. I was arranging flowers near the altar just like every other Saturday morning. The scent of lilies filled the church, and sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting colors across the wooden pews. That's when I heard his voice behind me. You have gentle hands for something so fragile. I turned around and saw him, Father Thomas. He stood there, Bible under one arm, eyes locked on mine. Not like a priest looking at a parishioner, not like a man avoiding temptation, but like someone who had been waiting to see me. I smiled nervously. Didn't know what else to do. His words felt too heavy for his simple conversation. He helped me carry the empty vases to the back room. We walked side by side, not saying much, but I could feel the weight of his silence. It wasn't empty. It was full of questions he couldn't ask out loud. When we reached the door, he stopped, looked at me again. Maggie. Sometimes God speaks through the simplest things, through the right people. Then he was gone. I stayed there, holding an empty bucket, unsure of what had just happened. But my heart knew. Something had shifted, and I wasn't ready for what came next. That night I couldn't sleep. His words echoed in my mind like a secret I hadn't yet learned to read. Sometimes God speaks through the right people. What did he mean by that? Was it just kindness? Or was there more? The next Sunday I arrived early, not for Mass, but for him. He came in with his usual calm pace, the white collar glowing against the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. He looked so distant, and yet so close. After the service, while people left in small groups, smiling and greeting each other, he saw me and gave the slightest nod, a silent invitation. I went to him. "You came early today," he said softly. "I didn't want to miss anything," I replied, not sure if I meant the Mass or him. He hesitated, swallowed hard. "There's a cafe across the street. Coffee's weak, but the pastries are good." It was a question in disguise. I accepted. When we walked out of the church, I felt eyes on us, small heads turning discreetly, mothers whispering to their daughters, priests exchanging glances, but he didn't seem to care. We entered the cafe, sat at a corner table, and there, for the first time, we spoke like two ordinary people, about books, about music, about things that had nothing to do with God, and for a few minutes, we pretended we were free. We met again, and again, always under the veil of casual encounters, helping with church bulletins, discussing charity events, organizing donations. But we both knew. The cafe became our secret refuge, a place where he could take off his collar and just be Thomas, not Father Thomas, not a man of God. Just a man. One afternoon, as rain tapped gently against the cafe windows, he reached across the table and touched my hand. Just for a second, a fleeting brush of his fingers against mine, but it changed everything. I looked at him, heart pounding. He pulled his hand back like he'd been burned. His eyes darted around as if someone had seen, as if God himself had noticed. "I shouldn't have done that," he whispered. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because in that moment I realized something. I wanted more. I wanted him, not just in secret, not just in stolen moments, but fully, completely, and maybe he wanted the same. After that, the meetings grew heavier, charged. Every word carried weight. Every silence screamed what we couldn't say. Then came the first real touch, the first real kiss. It happened outside the church one night, after everyone had gone home. We were alone in the shadow of the bell tower, and he looked at me like he was about to fall. "I'm not supposed to want this," he said. "But you do," I replied. He kissed me, and in that kiss there was love, fear, guilt, and a hunger neither of us could control. That was when I knew we were already too far gone. After that night under the bell tower, nothing was the same. We tried to pretend, to slow down, to pull back, but it was like trying to stop a fire with our bare hands. The more we fought it, the more it spread. He started coming to my house, small visits at first, bringing me books he thought I'd like, or stopping by after Mass to check on my mother's old cat, which he claimed missed me. But soon, those excuses faded. We stopped hiding behind kindness. I remember one evening clearly. It was raining again, hard this time, the kind of storm that made you feel like the world was washing away everything wrong. He showed up soaked, his collar gone, his hair sticking to his forehead. "I couldn't stay away," he said, and I opened the door. That night wasn't gentle, it wasn't careful, it was raw, real. And for the first time, he didn't say a prayer afterward, just held me, breathing against my neck like he was afraid I'd disappear. But guilt never left him for long. The next morning, while I was still asleep, he got up, dressed quietly, and went to the chapel across town. When I woke up alone, I found a note on the kitchen table. "Forgive me, not for leaving, for wanting me. I should have been angry, hurt. But all I felt was sadness, because I knew then he loved me, but he believed that love was a sin. Still, I couldn't let go. Neither could he. I finally understood. I couldn't wait for him to choose me. Not when every morning he walked away to pray for forgiveness. Not when he held me like I was both his salvation and his damnation. So one night, I made the choice. I went to the chapel where he always went after being with me, the one no one ever visited late at night. I waited outside in the cold, my breath forming clouds in the air until he stepped out, still adjusting his collar. He looked surprised to see me. "I need you to stop," I said. He didn't ask what I meant. He knew. "I can't keep watching." "You hate yourself for loving me," I whispered. "If this is wrong, then don't do it in secret. Don't pray your way out of it. Just let it go." He didn't speak right away, just stared at the ground like it held the answer. Then softly, he said, "I don't want to let you go." And that was when I knew I wasn't the only one holding on. After that night at the chapel, something changed, not in the world around us, but in him. In us. He stopped pretending so much. Not publicly, no one could know, but in private, he let go of some of the fear. He kissed me without pulling away, too soon. He looked at me like I was more than a mistake. We started going places together. Not church events or charity meetings, but real dates. A quiet dinner in a town an hour away where no one knew us. A walk through an autumn-lit park where we didn't have to whisper our words. One afternoon we drove to the mountains. Just a short trip, nothing extravagant. But when we reached the top of a small ridge and looked out over the valley, he took my hand and held it tight. "This is what peace feels like," he said. I turned to him surprised. "Peace," he nodded. "When I'm here, with you, I feel like I'm not betraying anyone. Not God, not myself." It was the first time he'd ever said something like that. The first time he didn't frame our love as a sin, and for once I believed him. But even then, guilt had its claws deep in him. Some nights, after we made love, I'd wake up and find him on his knees by the window, praying in silence. His lips would move, eyes closed, forehead pressed against the cold glass. I never stopped him because I knew he wasn't praying for me. He was praying about me. We built a life in the shadows. Not one anyone would understand, but one that felt real to us. There were moments, small, stolen pieces of normalcy that made me believe we could last. He laughed more, touched me without hesitation, even wrote me letters sometimes, not just confessions of guilt, but words of love. Real ones. I kept those letters hidden under the floorboards of my bedroom, each one folded carefully, sealed with ink and longing. I read them when he was away, when mass or duty pulled him back into his other life. But no matter how close we became, there was always a wall between us, a silent understanding. He belonged to something greater than me, greater than us. One night, after a long silence between visits, he showed up at my door with red eyes and a trembling voice. "I almost left," he whispered. I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. They asked me if something was wrong, if I needed time away. His voice cracked. I almost told them everything. I held his face in my hands, tears slipping down my cheeks. "Then why didn't you?" He looked at me like I was the only answer that ever mattered. "Because I love you, and because I'm afraid God won't take me back if I do." That confession broke something inside me, because I realized I wasn't just losing him to God. I was sharing him with something I could never fight, and no matter how much he loved me, I would never be enough to make him stay. He left, not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, like a tide pulling away from shore. At first he just stopped coming at night. Then the letters became fewer. The silences between us grew heavier than words ever could. One morning I woke up to an empty house and a note on the table. I have to go back. Not goodbye. Just back. I never saw him again. They transferred him to another state, a new parish, a fresh start. For him, for me. Just silence. And time. 50 years later, I still remember the way he prayed after touching me, as if I were both his greatest joy and his deepest shame. Love doesn't always end with hate. Sometimes it ends with surrender, and sometimes you love someone so much you let them go, even if it breaks you. This is my truth, and now it's yours too.